to introduce you today to another unique voice from Australia, an author that has had a love affair with Australian history and landscape for quite a few years, Judy Nunn. Judy, welcome to the Reading Room.
Thank you, Anna.
Judy, we're here today to really chat about your new book, Elianne. But before I get to that, I wanted to start by congratulating you on this amazing milestone of reaching 1 million copies sold around the world.
Yes, it is. It's a bit overwhelming, isn't it? I sort of picture myself and think, has this really happened? And wow, I mean, it's just a number, but to think of all those people reading my books, I'm deeply honoured.
And I actually wanted to ask you about that. I just wonder, how does that make you feel to know that the moment we're sitting and reading here, there could be somebody in Germany or France reading your book? And I also wonder how much contact you had with your international audience, and do you find that they get something different from your books than the Australian audience?
Well, this is a terrible, terrible thing. And this is, of course, Anna, it's the tyranny of distance, etc. But I'm monolingual, which, of course, to all those wonderful European people who have read my books in various translations, I feel so apologetic. And I made a video which went to Germany, to my wonderful publishers in Germany, and I actually learned a little phrase and introduced myself on the film thing, and I did. I felt so stupid. And they all speak several languages each, and so I find that very daunting. So because in any event, in answer to your question, because I'm not multilingual or even bilingual, it's very difficult for me to have that one-on contact. I have been to Frankfurt a number of times and met up with my gorgeous publishers there, and of course everybody's English is better than mine. They all speak impeccably. So there's no worry there, but I think it makes it a bit more difficult to have your one-on-one with many readers.
Now, writing is not a new skill to you, even though writing is kind of your second career, because you had a very successful career in film, theater, and radio. But what made you start writing in fiction?
Well, that very interesting question. I, like many actors who have been acting for a long time, it's quite natural to gravitate towards the written word. Usually, of course, it'll be via scripts. So I was writing scripts for television and also for radio, while radio was still around, sort of skits and things like that, but for television series and some reviews for the theatre. And then but that sort of seemed to lead into writing prose. I decided, well, one day I'll write a book. And I based it around a television series, so that I was writing about what I knew, and made it, actually it was a satire. It was a satire on the television industry, and I called it The Glitter Game. And I thought, well, that was fun, and it actually took off and became immensely successful. I think possibly because I had quite a commercial name in television, so that perhaps people thought it was a kiss and tell book, and then the publishers very much wanted to promote me in that area, as actually they even used the phrase Australia's new Jackie Collins, But I didn't want to go along that line. So with the next couple of books, I steadily began to grow into different areas until I started to have this love affair with Australian historically based fiction, which is what excites me to research. It inspires me, and obviously what excites me as a writer, hopefully it appears to be proving so, excites my readers.
You actually stole my next question, because that's exactly what I was wondering about. I mean, your first 3 novels were very clearly set in a world that you were very familiar with. And then came Cal, and after that, you've never turned your back again. It was all it went on from there. And I just wonder, why did you choose that particular form of historical fiction?
Oh no, the question still lives, as does the answer, because the third book in those ones based around the entertainment industry, the third book called Araluen, which actually proved to be the name of my fictional wine estate, that I had promised them would deal with the world of film. But I, wanting to spread my wings, I thought, right, well, I'm not going to leap straight into it. I brought out the ancestor of my movie mogul, in 1850 and settled him in the Barossa Valley, a very famous winemaking region of Australia, next door to Dr. Penfold, who was our most famous, vigneron, who actually he called his house the Grange. And of course, Penfold's Grange is our most famous red and most expensive red. So that was Dr. Penfold. And I thought, right, well, you've got to start learning about all of this. And so I didn't actually, my movie Mogul didn't actually come into existence until about page 150. And even then he was a young man working in the rag trade in Surrey Hills in the 1930s. So that was when I decided, look, this is it's hard work, but it's such fun. So it was that third book that turned me. And then I went into Cal, as you so rightly said, and that didn't go anywhere near the entertainment industry. So, and none of the other ones have. Well, no, one I did, Pacific. I went back to the entertainment industry a bit there. But
the other thing that's quite intriguing about your book, I guess, is always the different setup. You have taken us on a tour of almost the whole Australia. We've been to Southern Australia and Western Australia. I think we've been to Northern Territories and Tasmania and Sydney. How do you choose the subject? Is that something that you come across, or do you decide this is the state I'm going to choose?
No, that is very interesting. With Elianne, I must admit, I just had decided I did want to write a book based in Queensland because I hadn't yet set it. But then I thought, what will it be? Right, it'll be the sugarcane industry. But if I had not had such an exhilarating trip to, it was specifically Bundaberg, the southern area of the canefield regions of Queensland, I would have decided, right, okay, that was worth a look, but I'm not going to go there. I was actually specifically searching Queensland because I wanted to base it in Queensland. I don't normally do that. It will either be something like a town might fascinate me. Darwin grabbed me for my novel called Territory because Darwin was annihilated twice within a period of 30-odd years with the Japanese bombs in 42 and
the hurricane.
Yes, and the hurricane in 74. Or else it will be an actual event that is horrific. An actual happening, for instance, along the lines of Maralinga, which was the British nuclear testing ground in the deserts of South Australia. I found that so shocking that I decided to take a little bit of a whistleblower look on that. I mean, it's silly. I'm not a whistleblower at all. I'm a writer of fiction. But if it hadn't been for the 1984 McClellan Commission, 1984-85, I would never have been able to write that book. Because nobody was allowed to speak about it. It was all based upon, the right hand is not to know what the left hand's doing. Usually military bases based in remote areas, men are encouraged to gravitate towards each other, talk about their work, develop a common camaraderie. At Maralinga, no. You specialists there, you're not allowed to know what these guys are doing. Nobody's allowed to know what the scientists are doing. And all of this. And then it all came out, well, a lot of it came out in the Royal Commission. So the Secrets Act, was null and void. So everybody was allowed to talk. So that was just that specific event. Or, it could be not a place and not a specific event, but a period of history. Like Heritage was based in the Snowy Mountains with the influx of migrants at the end of World War II. And I found that a fascinating period in our history because we, the Australians, were learning in that particular area because we were outnumbered. All those redneck farmers suddenly didn't know what to do with people who spoke a different language and ate different food and wore different clothes, and they were the ones who were outnumbered. And the migrants all got on beautifully together. It was the Aussies who had the problem. So there's a big learning curve there. So I found that period. Frankly, it can be anything.
Anything.
Yeah.
Now, Elianne is set mostly in Queensland on a vast estate, and it follows in the steps of one multi-generational family predominantly. I found that fascinating how you have different characters that were quite different in their ways of thinking, and in some ways representing, I guess, the generations and the times, the way that people thought in these times. Which of these characters are you most proud of in this book, and which one did you find the most difficult to write?
Oh, gosh, that's a very difficult question to answer. I think, look, there's always with a book there's the structural area to be considered, and the book is predominantly set in the 60s, and the previous book I'd written, Tiger Men, was multi-generational and across 3 families. I didn't want to do that with this book. I wanted the book to be predominantly the one generation in the 60s. But there is a discovery of the past for the reader, which it's a rather manipulative way that I've discovered the past, but I needed, for the structure of the story, to take the reader back to 2 generations ago. So they are actually only sort of keyhole looks into the past, which explain various areas that are happening in the 60s. So I suppose I certainly loved my characters in the past. I loved Ellie, who is the character Elianne, after whom Big Jim Durham names his sugar estate. But I think predominantly the character I most concentrated upon and particularly identified with, because I lived myself during the 60s and like to think of myself as a feisty person, would be Kate, the lead character in it. And I know people like her who actually were more feisty than me because they were more driven politically. They became activists. And an activist friend of mine from the 60s who was far more politically inclined and worked a great deal more in human rights specifically, was arrested a number of times. ASIO had their eye on her and everything, whole great files of her in ASIO, and was a rabid feminist and everything like that. She helped me a great deal. I've thanked her in the acknowledgements. Because I was more focused on my acting career. I was a lot more shallow. But Meredith, I'll say her name. No, darling Meredith Bergman. She's a heroine of many of ours. And I see a lot of Meredith in Kate. So Kate represents a fine feistiness of Australian womanhood in that period.
Yeah, this actually leads me also very well to another thing that I was going to ask you. I mean, we are well known for the research behind your books. Many readers comment on this. And there is a fair amount of, I think, research in different subjects in this book. I mean, you're talking about the fight for the Aboriginal rights. You're talking about the Australian white policy. You're talking about the Vietnam War. There's a lot of it. What was the most surprising thing that you found while preparing and researching into this novel?
I learn things with every single novel that I do and every area of research, most definitely. Look, little things. That's probably so many people know, and yet, for instance, the word Kanaka labour, which was not only a term used, but right back to the blackbirding days when South Pacific Islanders were literally kidnapped and taken against their will and used as a form of slave labour. Then, of course, the government-appointed agents set up indentured three-year contracts where islanders were brought out and used for 3 years, but I mean with government-appointed wages and things like that. But they were still called Kanakas. The government referred to them as Kanakas. And it's actually now, it's a rather derogatory term in the sense that Kanaka actually was a Hawaiian word that simply means man. So to call people that come from the Solomons, from the New Hebrides, from everywhere across the South Pacific and just simply call them Kanakas is really pretty demeaning. Stuff like that probably so many of the Queenslanders know, but I think a lot of Australians don't know. And another thing that funnily enough, I think a lot of people weren't aware of today, and even back then, when national service came in and men were conscripted. And there was the conscientious objective. Of course, and Australia at war with the two different opinions, and people being threatened with jail if they the conscientious objectors. But okay, so the guys go off, they do their military training, and then they're sent off to active service to Vietnam, and they don't actually physically have to go. They can say, I won't go. And when I put that in the book, and my editor said, but Judy, this isn't so, surely they could. And so I had this scene that the military knew very well. They deliberately, the Nashos, as they were known, of course, were deliberately put through a hellish form of training where they were encouraged to actually loathe their senior officers, to bond as men, to form this bond, this brotherhood. So that then, after this extensive training, where many of them farm and city boys are suddenly, they are now military people.
They could not
and
leave their
how are they going to
names.
say, oh, well, look, mate, bye-bye, I think I'll stay home now, and go back to the family. And the army knew this. This was deliberate. So it's little things like that which are, of course, character-driven in the book. And I will have a character who will take offence at this or who will... So it's not just a narrator explaining this. It comes out of the action of the book and the involvement of the characters. So there are only two tiny little things. There would be other things that I've learned, but you surprised me with the question. I always learn a huge amount when I'm researching.
There's one more question that I wanted to ask you about. Elianne is a real page turner, and I think that part of it is this great structure that you have of the book, because you start pretty early into book. You tell us that there is a secret. We know that there's a secret. We know that these characters found it, but you don't actually tell us the secret till almost the final pages. So all through the story, well, I know for myself at least, every time you led me different path, I was imagining what that secret could be, but I did not guess it till the very, very end. I wonder if this is the deliberate way that you've structured the novel right from the start, or is that something that happened in the process of writing the book?
That's well noted, Anna. No, that is most definitely structural. That is a knowledge right from the beginning of the book, and the great test, of course, in deciding to do that is how to do it and hopefully not be annoying. You don't want everybody to be going, oh, for God's sake, come on, hurry up and tell me the secret. And you don't also want them to forget that there's a secret. So you have to keep reminding them. But you have to have reasons why it cannot be revealed. And hopefully I pulled it off. I don't know. But that was the difficult... There will always be a difficult thing, for me anyway, in the way I structure. And in this one, that was the difficulty.
Well, as a reader, I can tell you from my personal experience, I had great fun trying to discover what it was. And as I said, every time you led us different paths, I tried to imagine different scenarios for these endings. But I did not find out what it was till the very, very end. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, that's good. And
Judy, it has been a great pleasure talking to you. I really enjoyed Elianne, and I know that there's already quite a few reviews on our site, and they all raving about the book and experience of reading it, which is really great. And I think all of us are already waiting to see where else you're going to take us in Australia and what part of the history you're going to uncover for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. It's been lovely.
Thank you.